Greetings to everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar on the future of international education, leadership perspectives from around the world, focusing on Africa today. Please note that everybody is in listen-only mode. We encourage you to type your questions in throughout the presentations, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to our moderator today, Chancellor Gary May.
Thank you, Claire, and good morning, everyone, or perhaps good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm very pleased to join you and moderate this second panel of this series titled The Future of International Education, Leadership Perspectives from Around the World. I'll spend about a half an hour asking questions to our panelists, and then we'll have time for questions from the audience. This series is hosted by the Institute of International Education, along with UC Davis Global Affairs and the UC Davis Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It brings together university leaders for critical, global, and regional discussions on the consequences of COVID-19. In particular, this series focuses on what those consequences mean for global engagement in the future of international education and higher education in 2020 and beyond. Today's event focuses on the regional context in Africa, and I'm pleased to be joined by three distinguished leaders of African universities. I'm also pleased to say UC Davis remains committed to strong collaborations with African institutions and partners. Among many initiatives, we have several research and faculty connections, particularly through our One Health Institute. We also host prestigious fellows from Africa, most notably through the Mandela Washington Fellowship and the Hubert Humphrey Fellowship programs. I will be brief in my introduction so we can get right to our speakers. Prior to the onset of COVID-19, Africa was already in a period of significant transformation. In 2019, about half of the world's fastest growing economies were in Africa. Over the next 3 decades, Africa's youth population will increase by over 500 million. The number of cities in Africa with 5 million or more inhabitants is expected to triple to 17 over the next 10 years. All of these trends will have direct consequences for higher education in the region, as demands for knowledge, skills, goods, and services continues to increase across the continent. However, the COVID-19 pandemic is already affecting access to education and exacerbating inequalities. According to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, 9.8 million African students are experiencing disruption in their studies due to the closure of higher education institutions. Shelter in place is a luxury for many, and socioeconomic and health challenges have been equally threatening for many as well. While universities are pioneering online remote approaches, these opportunities may not reach all students, as only about 30% of sub-Saharan Africans have reliable access to the internet. And of course, budget shortfalls continue to be on the minds of all university leaders, including those in Africa. With this in mind, it's now my pleasure to welcome our three distinguished leaders to our panel today. They will share unique insights on how universities are navigating these challenges and emerging opportunities in the wake of COVID-19. They will also share other important dynamics within their countries and within their institutions. Due to time constraints, I won't be able to summarize the many accomplishments of our panelists, so I encourage you to look at their impressive biographies, which are available on the event webpage. I thank our panelists joining us. They are Patrick G. Awuah, President of Ashesi University in Ghana, Patricia Campbell, Chancellor of University of Rwanda, and Wim Villiers, Rector of Stellenbosch University in South Africa. I welcome you all and appreciate you taking the time to join us for this important conversation. President Awuah, I will direct the first question to you to begin. Question is, what is the role and responsibility of universities and institutions of higher learning, and specifically of international education, in times of global crisis and post-crisis?
Well, thank you for the question. Thanks for the invitation to this webinar. It's a real pleasure to be here. Well, I think that universities have this very unique role to educate the next generation of leaders in our societies as well as doing scholarly work to expand knowledge in the world, and to come up with solutions to problems that we all confront. In the scenario of the current situation in the world with this pandemic, it's very clear that universities and science labs around the world, as well as in Africa, have played a very important role in helping governments to model what the trajectory of this disease is, to come up with policy solutions in addressing this pandemic in their countries, and also on the side of medical research and even in testing for the disease among the population. So there's a very wide range of things that universities do in a situation like this. The ability for scholars to work with each other across borders strengthens all of us. It strengthens, it helps us to move more quickly. It helps us to build on each other's knowledge more quickly. And so, yeah, and of course, these are things that universities do even when there isn't a major crisis in the world, but especially when there's not a crisis in the world, building those relationships, building those networks is very important so that we're prepared when there's a real problem that we need to confront together.
Thank you. Chancellor Campbell, what are your thoughts?
Well, again, thank you for the invitation to participate in this. I think it's amazingly timely. I thought I'd give a few facts about the University of Rwanda before my comments. It's a relatively new university, actually. It was founded in 2013 when a variety of schools across the country were brought together to form the university. There's 6 colleges, including a medical school, dental school, veterinary school, 9 campuses. We have 29,000 students, most of whom are Rwandan. It's largely an undergraduate population, though we've been growing our advanced degree capacity. Frankly, we had 20 international students getting advanced degrees when the university was formed, and now has 400. And we have a $320 million research program. So it's really evolving into more of a research-focused university and inviting international students and faculty into that work. You know, the first thing I think a university does in a time like this is think about the safety and the ability for its students to continue in the work that they've started. In a country like Rwanda, for some that's not hard because, as you said earlier, they have internet and they could move to doing work online. For others who live in more remote, smaller villages in the country, that's very difficult. So one of the things we did was realize that while internet wasn't ubiquitously available, cell phone coverage was, and that with a smartphone, our students could keep up with their classwork. So we began an effort to raise funds so that some of our students who couldn't even afford to have a cell phone could. And that was one of the first things we did, was find ways for our students to stay connected. I think the other thing that's really important, obviously, students are worried. They're challenged by other kinds of needs in their community. So communication was important, and trying to pay attention to making sure that we did our best to stay in contact, communicate, give information. The country of Rwanda shut down completely very quickly. Maybe there are things to be learned from how some of these smaller countries in Africa handled some of what happened with the pandemic, because they've really been able to control the number of cases. The total cases in the country are now at about 800, with a population of 13 million people in the country. We do anticipate being able to be back in school in September. So hopefully this is a somewhat contained disruption in the education for our students. And the country is starting to open up. Things that had been closed down are are beginning to be able to be available, like transportation and other kinds of things that were completely shut down. I think that the other thing about this is that not only just the access to technology, but the sophistication of it. So it has made us pay more attention to our capacity in that arena than we might have had we not had the pandemic. I think I'd also comment that in a place like Rwanda, we thought here in the United States about things like, do we have enough intensive care unit beds? Do we have enough respirators to be able to handle the number of people who might be severely affected by COVID-19? And the answer to that question in a country like Rwanda was no. We don't have enough ICU beds. We don't have enough respirators. I happen to know that in the entire country of Zambia, for example, there were 12 respirators. So one has to take the tact of prevention and to slow the spread of a disease because you know you wouldn't be able to handle it. So I think the first response was trying to reassure our students, make it possible for them to continue the classes they were currently enrolled in, and do our best so that we can open up in a more normal way as fast as possible.
Thank you for those perspectives. Certainly we in the US could learn a lot from you if you've been able to keep the cases down to below 1,000.
Right.
Rector Villiers, what is the perspective from Stellenbosch University?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to join this webinar. So I speak to you from Stellenbosch University. It's located about 50 kilometers outside Cape Town in the Western Cape. We're a research-intensive university with about 32,000 students. A third of these students are postgraduate. I briefly want to add to what the other two chancellors said, that certainly we live in a globalized world where we face many commonly shared global grand challenges, and the coronavirus pandemic represents, I would say, the latest of these. So, but as universities and also as African universities and at Stellenbosch University, we've been working with our global and also continental partners now for a number of years to address other global challenges, such as climate change, food security, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment. We have quite a large medical school here as well. So we should not lose track of some of these other challenges as well. And how we respond to these crises vary according to our unique contexts and histories. And it is imperative that as we face these challenges, that we absolutely need to collaborate and share knowledge and expertise so we can solve these collective challenges in the shortest time. The coronavirus, as I said, is an example of such a challenge, where a vaccine, we now hear that it may be towards the end of next year, probably, I would think optimistically available at the earliest, and treatment are really of critical time importance. We hear about the inefficacy of hydroxychloroquine and some of the challenging results with dexamethasone now, but it's especially at a time like this where we need good science and good science education. But the other challenges that we face globally includes, as we did at our university, the move to what we call emergency online learning and teaching, and to enable access and inclusivity through these processes, whilst we also, we want to save the academic year. We want to support our students to complete their academic programs, and also at the same time ensure the development of our graduates in terms of what we at Stellenbosch University refer to as our graduate attributes. These are things that are going to be still present with us post-crisis, and we will need to ensure that we work together with our global partners to provide opportunities for exchange, collaboration, and research, and to also, very importantly, to support social justice and intercultural understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. We heard some common themes from the three panelists, items like safety and connectivity and communication. service to the society and continuity of programs for the students. It's interesting that we have these themes that are the same no matter where we are in the world. Let me ask a second question. How is your university pursuing internationalization in the current and emerging global environment? Now, what are the key challenges and opportunities that you are facing in doing so? President Awuah?
Well, I would like to start answering that question by just describing the situation from this last semester. So at the time when the COVID emergency came about in the world, we had 4 faculty members who were US based, who were in country teaching at our university. And they came from the University of Maryland, from MIT and Harvard. As we shut down the campus and moved online, and Ghana moved to close its borders and to have all the schools and universities shut down, those 4 individuals returned to the United States as quickly as possible. However, we moved to online education 2 weeks after the shutdown. So just allow time for us to get students home, to get them situated, to make sure the faculty were all returned and were safe from wherever they came from. And then we restarted online. And that online education went pretty seamlessly, I would say. So 95% plus of our students were able to complete their work online. You know, as Patricia said, there are students who come from areas or from households that are economically challenged, that may not be able to afford access to data and so on. And we just gave them the funding so that they could get connected. We gave them the devices so they could get connected. And, you know, and so the faculty in the United States were able to, along with their colleagues who remained here in Ghana, were able to complete coursework for the semester. And this is very interesting learning experience for us, because what it tells us is that in the future, you know, being engaged with other academics outside our borders will not only be about having them come to Ghana to teach here, but may very well include just online education from where they are, connecting with students in Ghana and elsewhere. Now, the question is broader than just what happened this semester. Where do we see the future? You know, internationalization and our drive for internationalization has been also about a cultural exchange, sort of cultural interchange, exchange of ideas. And for that, it is helpful for people to actually move into other cultures, be immersed in other cultures, and learn in that way, not just online. Online is great, but what it does is it doesn't give you the full context of the other place that you're engaged with. And so we expect that when this particular emergency is over, that we will still have a flow of students coming to our campus, students going to other campuses in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere. And we expect that the same will happen with our faculty as well. As we speak, we are engaged with a university in Switzerland, ETH, to develop our first graduate program in engineering jointly with them. And you know, that kind of work will continue because it's important. And this pandemic will pass, and we will get back to actually crossing borders as we need to. But we will definitely add this online component as a way of doing even more.
Yes, thank you for those thoughts. Certainly getting visitors and our own students and faculty at home at the beginning was important, and this rapid transition to online seemed to go pretty seamlessly for many of us around the world, but challenges remain. And I'm glad you talked about the future, because certainly our partnerships internationally remain an objective, and the virus will indeed pass at some point. Chancellor Campbell, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I have lots of them. But let me just again say a little bit about the University of Rwanda. You know, as a public university, the vast majority of our students are Rwandan, so maybe 99% of our undergraduate students are Rwandan. On the other hand, as we're developing our advanced degrees, a lot of that has been done in partnership with a variety of universities and funding entities across the world. There are 4 World Bank centers of excellence that are looking at very timely topics like the Internet of Things, data science, sustainable development, STEM education. And in those centers, we do have a number of international students. And our challenge in the COVID crisis was to make sure that we could continue to support those students. And we found ways to be able to financially help support them so that they could frankly remain in Rwanda and be able to pick up where they left off with their work in those centers. I think, you know, maybe nothing has proved more evidently than this COVID crisis, the interconnectedness of the world and how important it is for us to look at issues together. Clearly, health issues are such an obvious example, but issues like climate change and sustainability and safety and data science. So I really do think it's imperative that we work together, learn how to share information and find better solutions, because we are doing that. And it's you know, there are a lot of learnings I think that we can take from this. So prevention, public health prevention, the idea that the only way to control the COVID virus is if we develop a vaccine. Well, that's been true for many health problems in Africa, like malaria. How long has malaria been a huge source of illness and death across certain climates and countries, and we still don't have a really effective way of controlling that. So I hope that we look at how we've tried to respond to COVID, what we have done well, what we haven't done well. When I say we, I'm not really meaning University of Rwanda, I'm meaning all of us together. And so how can we do things better to cope with, I think, serious issues around the well-being of the world and the planet? So I'm being pretty dire in the way I'm speaking about this, but I think COVID could prove to us how important working together, learning together, thinking about prevention, public health, and our climate, I think, are just obvious examples of that. And I think there's some really interesting hybrid kinds of things that we might be able to do across in person. And I agree, to some degree, there's no substitute for that, as well as the online capacities, and working with those things together in an interconnected way that can make it possible for people to be connected real time more easily, as well as in person. I can think of the idea of a degree or a project that would use both the capacity to connect online as well as in person. So some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Indeed, it is a connected world. I wouldn't say that your comments were dire. I think some of these challenges are sobering challenges for us all, and we're going to have to face them together. And I appreciate your elucidating those. Rector, Villiers, what do you think about this question?
Yeah, thank you very much. And these are very interesting thoughts from the other university leaders. So Stellenbosch University, as I said, is a research-intensive university, and about 13–14% of our 32,000 students are actually international students. So slightly more than 4,000 students or so. Most of them come from Southern Africa, number 1 and 2 respectively from Namibia and Zimbabwe. But very interesting, we have about 800–900 German students who attend university here as well. So this has certainly been a significant challenge for us. We also have around about 370 or so postdoctoral fellows. A significant percentage of them are international fellows as well, research fellows. So this has been a significant challenge for us in terms to how we pursue internationalization in this environment. But we have to take new directions with a focus on providing funding support for research related to COVID pandemic. More than probably about 55% of our total budget is research dependent. And a great deal of our research outputs are linked to international collaborations and have been impacted in terms of extended timeframes for completion. And in a number of other ways, our internationalization activities have moved to the online and virtual space. We've had to move winter schools, our African Doctoral Academy. We moved that online with other programs taking place through webinars. Physical mobility is a challenge. We've had to cancel our incoming exchanges in our semester 2, which would be a fall in the northern hemisphere, and postponing outgoing exchanges until later in the year. Once we move what we call South Africa's risk-adjusted strategy is with 5 was complete lockdown, and we will only be able to have these outgoing exchanges. We're now currently in level 3, but to level 1, we'll be able to continue with these outgoing exchanges. But that's really poses challenges for students who have been accepted into programs who are now in their final years of study and may not get this opportunity again. We also want to continue providing support to international full degree students who have had to return to their home countries. I said we have about more than 4,000 international students. About 700 of them remained on campus. And we want to ensure that the academic programs of these students is not compromised, and we are committed to providing additional support to this group of students. But it was interesting that in addition to these thoughts is one of the things that I considered a big priority when I became Rector and Vice-Chancellor is internationalization. And my international office is certainly making a strong push for expansion and for that, and highlighting the fact that this pandemic has shown that we need a comprehensive and responsible international approach is really needed to take this further. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for those comments. Indeed, our research does depend on our ability to collaborate internationally, and certainly we have responsibilities to our students that don't diminish when we have a pandemic. So thank you for those thoughts. We're starting to get some questions in from the audience. I'm going to go to those. The first one is for President Awuah. The question is, how can U.S. institutions best work with our partner institutions in Ghana during this time? Are there many virtual programs taking place? And when would you suggest we send students and faculty back to Ghana for study abroad?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So my thoughts are that we need whatever relationships universities already have in place need to be continued. Those contacts need to be maintained. Conversations need to be continued. Realistically, about 75% of universities are probably in the United States are probably going to start, on-campus education this fall. It's probably going to be similar here in Ghana. Maybe all of us are going to start in September. However, international exchange in September will be difficult for a couple of reasons. One is that government is asking all universities as we get back on campus to make sure that we can have social distancing, which means that we're going to not have all students on campus probably. We're going to have maybe a quarter of our normal student body on campus with 3/4 doing online. And that quarter that will be on campus will likely prioritize 3 groups. The freshman class, the engineering students that need to be doing labs on campus, and students who can't get access online easily from home. We suspect that many families will not be so eager to send their kids abroad this fall. But next year, next January, next September will be a different story. And we should expect that we will get back to normal as soon as a vaccine is ready, and the world can start to get back to normal. So my advice is keep all those connections active, keep the conversations active. As I mentioned, we are in the process of working with another university in developing a graduate program. That work is ongoing online. We expect that it will start next year as planned. And all the relationships that we have, we are maintaining, and we're going to continue to work towards receiving students probably in the spring or in the fall of next year, and also sending our students out.
Okay, thank you. We have a question for any of our panelists. The question is, has there been a shift in focus toward workforce development and vocational education in planning for a post-pandemic recovery? Would anyone like to address that question?
I'll make a comment. I don't think it's necessarily a shift based on COVID. It's more of a intention, at least at the University of Rwanda, to try to make sure that our students are prepared for careers and employment when they graduate. And that has been going on, I think, pre-COVID and will continue post-COVID. So I don't see a shift, but I do see that that has been a bit of an emphasis. Really wanting to educate students so that they're successful upon graduation is what I see. A lot of movement from maybe some traditional disciplines to more of the disciplines that we think would be science and technology and business, which are growing areas in the country of Rwanda.
We do have a responsibility to have our students be prepared for their careers.
Yep.
Would anyone else like to make a comment?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Patricia there. I haven't seen much of a shift in that regards. Maybe again, some local perspective is that there are 26 public universities in South Africa, and we, with a total enrollment of around about 850,000 or so, but then also 50 TVET in the TVET system, and that would be the teaching and vocational education and training colleges, and that has quite a larger enrollment. So I haven't seen a shift in the public universities with regard to vocational, but where we have seen, and also in our institution, shifts is towards the future world of work. Certainly that the AI and the fourth industrial revolution, different types of work. And for example, at our university, we founded a school for data science and computational thinking last year that has received a great deal of interest, but not a shift towards more vocational areas. Thank you.
Sure. So neither of you has seen a shift, more of a constant progression toward these important areas for careers. Next question is for Chancellor Campbell directly. Given your institution's relatively young status, what is your most important need right now? If you could design a plan for the future, what would that look like in terms of international education initiatives and relationships?
Oh, wonderful. Well, I think our most important need is really great faculty. And there may be really terrific opportunities to work with other institutions so that there might be exchange or even, opportunities not for necessarily permanently moving to Rwanda, but sharing and working on projects together. I think that would really be good for our university, and I think it would be opportunities that faculty in other universities would also appreciate. There's so many interesting things to be studied in Rwanda if you think about veterinary medicine, and was talking to UC Davis just a little bit, to the provost, about that, because there are things that happen in Rwanda that don't happen in California, right? And so zoonotic disease, who isn't aware of that issue today? Just as an example of things that I could see growth and study and working together be very productive. So I would say that would be the very most important thing for us to be thinking about.
Great, and we are certainly at UC Davis ready to and willing to be a partner.
Terrific.
Question for any of you.
So this is Patrick. I would add to Patricia's comments that also faculty development in the sense of having faculty be able to go complete PhDs and so on would also be very helpful.
Yes, yes. Good comment. Thank you.
That is a good perspective. Thank you, Patrick. The next question is for any of you, and it touches on a topic we haven't hit yet. To what extent are your institutions training students in entrepreneurship to help develop the continent's private sector? Who would like to address that one?
Again, I'm happy to jump in on that one. That has been a focus, frankly, of the government in Rwanda, knowing that they want people to be able to start small businesses. And so, yes, there are programs and courses of study at the university that would help students be able to do that kind of thing. I think it's not necessarily a how do I want to say it, inherent way of thinking, except in the agricultural sector. And so for people to understand that there are other kinds of things that they can start and grow themselves, it is definitely part of the thinking at the University of Rwanda, and frankly, in the country generally.
So I would say that it is so central to Ashesi that it's in our mission statement, and all students take courses in design thinking and entrepreneurship and are given projects that really guide them to see the opportunities and problems in our country. And so they go out and figure out what are problems that are worth solving and come up with solutions to those problems. And it permeates everything that we do at Ashesi.
Indeed.
Yeah, I would, if I can add to that, I would agree with what both Patricia and Patrick said, in that it's so, entrepreneurship is so integral to what we do as a university. And I think especially in South Africa, in our context is that we have a youth bulge, and one of our major problems is unemployment. And at this time, it's around about 29–30%, which is very significant. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's about that we want to equip our graduates in terms of their attributes for also to be generating jobs in the economy. And so, and I spoke about the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking, which would be exactly working on these attributes. And we also have a very strong faculty of agricultural sciences and engineering. And so we have established an innovation hub or a launch lab where we help staff and also students with good ideas that they want to bring to the market through the so-called the valley of death of R&D, and give them space for 2.5 years or so where they can develop those ideas. But absolutely, this is integral to what we're doing as a knowledge producing institution.
Thank you, Wim. Thank you all. I'm glad to hear that innovation and entrepreneurship remain a high priority for all of your institutions. The next question deals with the topic we all sort of touched on earlier, and that's internet connectivity. And the audience member would like to know, can you all elaborate more about other ways you're reaching out to students remotely who may not have internet access? and how you deal with bandwidth access in general.
I think I mentioned the smartphone because that access is available everywhere in the country. And so, you know, I helped with some fundraising, frankly, so that we could get smartphones to students because they could use the phone, not as good as perhaps, but better than nothing, where there wasn't internet access. So that's what we did, and is the short run answer, so that they could at least be connected with a smartphone.
Yes, that seems to be a good alternative solution.
Yeah, I think it was, and it was, you know, in a pinch, what do we do? These students can't connect through the internet, but it was obviously, and when we said that to people, you know, these students can't even afford a smartphone. People were like, let me help, right? So we were able to do some quick turnaround to get some resources to support that.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, it was.
So I would add that, this is Patrick, I would add that I think this has been a real eye-opener for us. You know, we had to lend laptops to some of our students who didn't have laptops. There were students that were in areas that could get data access, but who couldn't afford to pay for it. And so we had to pay for data for them to get access. And one thing that this sort of raised for us is that, you know, in the medium and long term, we need to really rethink our business model to make sure that every student can have a laptop. I mean, today we have a model that ensures that every student has access to all the textbooks that they need, and technology is becoming as fundamental as that. And so this is something that we're going to be thinking through. How do we make sure that, you know, students who are coming from you know, economically disadvantaged backgrounds still have access to a laptop, and making sure that we get that to them.
Very important.
Yeah, well said.
Yes, indeed. And Patrick, we have another, I'm sorry, Wim, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add to what was said here. So absolutely, connectivity is a major issue when we embarked on so-called emergency online learning and teaching, and that we had to provide laptops to those students who didn't have them. It was about 2,000 laptops that we did, because it's not good enough to provide access to education, but we also want to ensure success. And then the two other issues was and also as a national higher education sector, negotiated for so-called zero-rated sites that students could get access to with smartphones and or laptops. And then thirdly was because data bundles through the mobile network operators was quite expensive, so we managed to get a rate for a data bundle of about 10 gigabyte through the day, 20 gigabyte at night, at about, I think, equivalent to $4 per month for all our students. But that in the long term becomes a financially a huge burden, and we can't continue that ad infinitum. Thanks.
Sure, but certainly important to reduce the cost burden for the students. That's pretty impressive. Patrick, there's a question that's pretty timely for you. It's about this current environment around social justice. The question is, along with the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a societal pandemic of systemic racism that has risen to the forefront of international news, especially in response to events in the United States. President Awuah released a meaningful statement discussing this issue on a personal level. What role do you feel African universities have in addressing these issues? And will this be an issue to be addressed in the future of international education?
Well, as I said in my statement, one of the things that's really important for addressing this, in addition to what needs to happen in judicial reform in the U.S. and among the leadership in the United States, getting equal access and opportunities to everyone, that the narratives that we tell about people of African heritage is really important. And one of the sources of that narrative is the African continent. And so we need to be very clear that we need to build societies here that are, grounded in fairness and justice and inclusion. We need to be very clear that we're really driving innovation and science and technology as part of our economic development agenda. And we need to really also endeavor to enrich and promote our culture around the world. And so there's a really big role that African universities play in all of this. And certainly when we talk about internationalization, when we send students out to go learn about other cultures or receive students and faculty here, it should be really around this notion that we're really building a pro-positive narrative for all people in the world, including Africans and people of African descent.
Thank you. That's an important message for the African diaspora around the world and all those with whom we interact, which is everyone. So thank you for that insight. Next question for anyone or all. How are you preparing to meet your first year students in the fall?
Well, I'll take a go at that. So as I mentioned earlier, what we're looking to do is really prioritize those students who would have difficulty getting online where they are, or who have economic challenges, as well as students who are taking courses of study that require lab work. There's another issue that is really very important for people who are economically disadvantaged, which is just general sort of upkeep, room and board. So this past semester, when we closed our campus, one of the things that we did was we gave cash to students who were returning rural villages and to challenging circumstances, because even feeding themselves is a challenge. And when they're on campus, they get free room and board as part of their scholarship. When they go home, we need to support that. And so as we're getting our freshmen back, we're going to be looking at that issue in our awards of scholarships to students that are coming in, whether they're going to be on campus or not, if they need that kind of assistance to try and get it to them. So this is how we're planning to deal with it. And we also think that it's, our continuing students, were able to do online quite well this last semester. But part of the reason was they already knew each other, they knew the faculty, so they had that context, and the freshmen won't have that. So finding a way to get them on campus so they can build that connection is going to be important.
Indeed. Let me ask, this is a question I think is quite interesting. Has the current situation required any of you to use, to exercise new or different leadership approaches at your university?
Well, maybe I should have a stab at this one. The previous question is also actually quite interesting, because we're in South Africa, we're on a different cycle. So our academic year is from January to December. So in a sense, it allows us to kick the can a little bit down the road. So South Africa is currently has a significant upsurge of COVID cases. We're probably around about 115,000 or so, with more than 2,000 deaths. And the Western Cape is considered the at this time the epicenter. And we believe that we're about a few weeks away from the maximum of this, and before we'll go down, we have an intake of about 5,500 freshmen destined to come in next year towards the end of January. We closed our applications towards the end of June. So it may be that we need to shift this out a little bit. But in terms of different leadership abilities that we had to develop, for one thing is for certain is to become more au fait with Teams meetings and online meetings. I've been working from home now for almost 3.5 months now. And it is amazing what one is able to achieve through online access, and certainly some things I'm just not going to do again, even when we can go back to the office. But it is very much in a much more personal and also on a telephonically contact one-on-one basis that one needs to do these to take the university further to ensure institutional sustainability. Thanks.
Thank you.
I might make a comment on that. You know, change is always difficult, right? People are fearful of it, and what does it mean for me? So it's almost like, because there's such a clear difference in how we need to do things right now, I'm kind of hoping that it makes it a little easier to make changes, maybe ones we would have wanted to make anyway. I'm a bit of an optimist, so maybe that is reflected in that idea, but we've had to make changes. And by and large, they've been the right things to do and gone well. So maybe there's an example here that says, if there are other changes we should be making, we can do it.
Indeed, never waste a good crisis, as we say here.
Exactly.
We have about 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get everyone a chance to make any closing remarks you might want to make for 1 or 2 minutes, as well as myself. Maybe we could think about something more forward looking in ways that COVID-19 might change the landscape of international education or global education going forward, or research, and now and in the future. And how do you think that your university will continue to respond to this and other challenges globally?
I wonder, Gary, if I could just kick off perhaps with some closing comments, and I would totally agree with Patricia with regard to the imperative of change and how this may make it easier. I was really very encouraged by how quickly our academic staff and support staff, and also our students, how they transition to what we call emergency online learning, and that we're able to, I'm quite confident that we were able to salvage the academic year. But secondly, in terms of international collaboration, I think it is, we've been a strong proponent of developing joint online programs and joint PhD programs or joint master's degree programs. So we have joint PhD programs with 23 other international institutions where you have periods of exchanges, and we need to do that more online as well. So we must also not forget that these online programs, it's an opportunity, and these joint programs, it's an opportunity for internationalization at home that we could be strengthening, because not all students can make use of international mobilities, and so we need to develop these internationalization at home and co-curricular opportunities as well. Thank you.
It's an interesting point. We need to be more flexible with how we define international education, I think. Let's see. Patrick, would you like to make a closing statement?
Yeah, I would say that Wynn took pretty much what I was going to say, that I think that, first of all, what we've been doing in the past with internationalization, I hope that we'll do more of, and that this crisis actually teaches us that building those kinds of connections and relationships is very important. but I also feel that the move to online presents a real opportunity to go beyond what we've been doing in the past. And things like joint programs online, faculty development online, are things that we really should pursue more actively now, because we see that it is really possible for teams to engage electronically. And there's no reason why we shouldn't continue that. I also hope that internationalization will also mean for us more South-South connectivity, that African institutions should be connecting with each other more easily online, and we see that this is possible. So I hope that we can drive that as well in the future.
Thank you. A sense of optimism in your comments, I detect. Patricia,
absolutely.
Yeah, well, I would absolutely agree with the comments just made. And I think if I go back, Chancellor May, to some of your introductory comments about the growth that is going to be happening in Africa, I think it really offers opportunity for both Africa and then the other countries, not Africa, to work together. There's going to be this really monumental increase in population and in the importance of working on some of those bigger issues that I mentioned earlier. So I think, if anything, what has happened is this is going to spur added need and desire to be working internationally, working together. That's what I would say.
Indeed, collaboration will continue to be, and partnership will continue to be important for all of us. And I appreciate that comment. And I'm going to just mention to our audience, there are many questions we weren't able to get to, and I apologize for that, but I'm grateful that we had such interest in the panel, and thank you for tuning in. We've about come to our conclusion of the panel today, and I'm going to express again my gratitude to President Awuah, Chancellor Campbell, and Rector Villiers for joining us. They gave very insightful comments and their perspectives on the immediate and longer term impact of not only COVID-19, but other topics as well on the role of internationalization for universities in the region. Were very useful and insightful as we move forward. Although the future challenges may seem immense to us sometimes, it's clear that universities will continue to play a critical role in innovation and collaboration toward reaching global solutions that benefit society. And as a community, we all benefit from global partnerships and sharing knowledge to address our common global challenges while responding to our local, national, and regional contexts and needs as well. In these challenging times, we need to work together and rethink how our institutions will function and address their local and global challenges. We must deliver innovative instructions and most of all, generate solutions that will help us address the multiplicity of crises in health and poverty and climate and energy and economics. So once again, I want to thank IIE for their partnership with us in this series, with us at UC Davis. We, as you see pictured here on the slide now, we have additional panels coming up in the series. The next panel event is titled The Future of International Education, Leadership Perspectives from Asia and Oceania, and it's scheduled for July 2nd. Please register for that webinar in advance. And once again, thank you to the panelists, thank you to IIE, thank you to the audience for joining us today for this very interesting discussion. We hope to see you again next time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, real pleasure.